We're here to talk about clinical engineering and kind of bringing them into risk discussions. Tell me your experience there, what's worked, what success looks like.
Right. So what I typically see as the problem across hospitals is this disconnect between the clinical engineers, biomed folks who understand the clinical workflows, understand how medical devices fit into those environments, but they lack the cybersecurity expertise to properly protect those systems. And then on the other side, hospital IT security groups, they understand the cybersecurity piece, but they don't understand the challenges with medical devices and the way those devices fit into those clinical workflows, the way that biomed clinical engineering does. So what I've seen as being really the most successful way that hospitals tackle this is they create a joint group or joint task force between biomed and IT security in one team so that they can educate each other and properly secure those medical devices.
So in terms of a gap on the engineering on the clinical engineering side, are they concerned about disruptions to service, to patient care, et cetera? Kind of where's the gap there?
Right, absolutely. Availability typically is the number one priority for those groups. You know, if the equipment is not up, you can't perform procedures, you can't perform the life-saving techniques that need to be done. So like out of the CIA triad, availability is number one. But you know, from an organization perspective, availability is huge, but so is confidentiality. Like if you see the kinds of ransomware attacks that happen at hospitals, which is the main issue, you always see data exfiltration with stiff HIPAA penalties and things like that. But always, you're right, getting systems back up and running and available to treat patients is always number one.
And so how do you kind of introduce the risk discussion? Or do you have, 2 or 3 best practices that you kind of start with?
Yeah, I think one of the speakers here at Nexus yesterday talked about, really brought this up in a great way, shifting the idea about risk as like a specific thing and more towards tying it to business goals and outcomes. So like, again, going back to availability, right? We see that some departments don't want to patch their systems because you have to bring those systems down. Maybe it's going to be an extended downtime and you can't use those systems for X number of hours, right? But now you're taking on additional risk to the availability of that system. Now it's vulnerable to those ransomware attacks that we were talking about. And if your hospital gets hit, you're going to have an even longer extended downtime. So are you willing to, take a small amount of scheduled downtime now when you can plan around it from a procedure perspective, or look to have a long, unplanned extended downtime when something bad actually happens?
So what kind of change are you influencing maybe perhaps in their day-to-day kind of thing?
Right. On the day-to-day side of things, you've got to plan these activities into your schedules. Systems can't be scheduled to perform procedures 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You've got to build in time to do patching and maintenance on the cybersecurity side, or you will leave yourself vulnerable to those long-term outages.
We're making it sound like they're very resistant to this. Are they? I mean, how are they receiving this? Are they being receptive?
There's such a wide variety of practice across different hospitals. Some groups are very resistant. Other groups take this very seriously and do a great job of integrating updates and other kinds of cybersecurity activities into their regular duties. But it is by no means standard. And even within a given hospital, you see a wide range of different practices. Some departments being very good about it, and some departments, needing to be pushed by the executive team to do that kind of work.
How often are you starting from scratch with a clinical engineering team as far as risk goes?
Again, varies widely. Typically, what I see is that the larger hospitals have already spent the past few years getting these kinds of programs in place, training people and bringing people up to speed and changing their processes. But on the more small to mid-sized hospitals, there's really a much longer way to go. Speaking in just broad generalizations, not about anyone specifically, but typically we see that they don't have the resources to staff, that cybersecurity, med device cybersecurity team. A lot of times they have resource gaps even on the IT security side. So to be able to dedicate people just on the med device piece is, a huge gap that needs to be filled at that level. And, folks like Siemens and other people that are here at Nexus, we have programs to support hospitals in those kinds of endeavors. If, a hospital is struggling, you can outsource some of those kinds of activities to Siemens or, some of the other Claroty partners that are here. And that's a really good way to bring some expertise in when you're struggling to build that internally.
And so when your team goes into a hospital, what does the engagement look like? Is it strictly kind of learning? Is there tech involved?
Oh, yeah. So we run essentially like a full-scale med device security program. We go in, we learn about the way your IT and biomed functions now, who the key stakeholders are, and we integrate med device security analysis and mitigation planning into those groups so that the right actions are taken by the right groups to bring that organizational risk down overall.
So just as a final question, how do you measure success, or what are you telling them in terms of how they should be viewing success, what it looks like?
I guess I see a couple of things. You were talking about risk earlier. I would say risk is king, right? So bringing organizational risk down from the current high level that it's probably at today to something that is much lower and can be accepted by the business and the insurance providers and everything else like that. So that's number one. And also number two, efficiency, like making sure that ecosystem of med device security and all the players that are involved are working well together and in an efficient manner.